I'm Lisa Rex. I started making travel content maybe just under a year ago. And for people like myself who are neurodivergent, maybe midlife, maybe a woman, and also seeking less sensory input when they travel, as well as maybe a calmer environment. So that's kind of a new project for me, but I'm really enjoying it. Currently, I'm working freelance as a user experience researcher, and also I have travel coach certification in progress. I was diagnosed with ADHD, well, I guess about nearly 2.5 years ago. And because I didn't explain everything, so I sought out an autism diagnosis. And not to my huge surprise, that was also diagnosed, and that was less than a year ago. So I'm still understanding how all of this works because I'm 51 now, and it's a kind of a surprise still when I think about it. But then when you reflect back on life events, then yeah, it explains pretty much everything. I'm also sure that I have hypermobility that affects especially my lower legs and ankles and feet, as well as dyspraxia and dyscalculia. I was born and raised in the US, and I lived there until I was 24. My childhood was, we were living in a pretty rural area, so overall there weren't too many demands of sensory issues. That said, I'm pretty sure I was living in a very wildly neurodivergent household, and it just never occurred to any of us that's what was going on. When I was younger, when I was a teen, I was called stuck up, snobby, rude, cold, all those lovely things. But now I know. I think I was just struggling to show up in the world that in the way I think I was meant to be. So, in at this time, this would have my childhood in the 90s or late 80s 90s. There was a lot of pressure to have this like cute personality, and that's just not me, or at least not in the way that I think was expected because I was just very, very introverted and very awkward and very shy. When I was in my early 20s, I moved to Silicon Valley and I found myself working full time. And it was great fun. I always wanted to have a job where I could earn enough money to travel. But at the same time, I was finding life in Silicon Valley. This is in the 90s. It was a lot of what car you drove, what you wore, and who you knew, who your friends were. So again, this was all kind of a struggle with me. I'm just not comfortable with a lot of people, as it turns out. So as it turns out, I got married kind of young and moved to the UK, where I settled in. Very easy to settle in somewhere where you're not expected to be a certain way. So I'm pretty sure I was more or less myself, and I enjoyed it. The other thing that I really loved about it is that people my age weren't interested in things like cars and clothes in the same way that people that I knew in California. So yeah, I found my place, right? I mean, all that said, I never really wanted to climb the corporate ladder. Like I knew that deep down that wasn't me. But at the same time, as I got a little bit older and changed roles and got more experience, I, got a couple of promotions. There's this pressure to, achieve the next level, the next level. And I think that's where it started to fall apart for me a little bit. And in my last role, I don't know, I don't even know if I was doing a good job anymore. None of my annual reviews were clear to me, like what I should be working on. And then sometimes there were things that I was pointed out I should be working on. I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. So anyway, I ended up walking straight into burnout. So in 2023, I took 3 months of unpaid leave. I did some travel, and it was great. I reevaluated my career and life decisions, and decided that I would try something different. And but at the same time, kind of knowing that I probably didn't want to be in a full-time role for many more years. Yeah, when I got back, it turns out I just couldn't cope with the full-time work. It's the effort of, well, especially traveling to the office. So, waking up and putting on the casual, but professional casual uniform, getting out the door, getting to the train on time, commuting into London, all of that. It was a lot. And then, of course, having to be in meetings. A lot of these were video calls. It just, I don't know, I feel like lost, I just lost my spark in a big way, and this built up slowly over time. I know that it felt like, to work full time, it just took all of my energy. I didn't really have energy to do my personal admin, to have much of a social life, and certainly like things like household chores fell by the wayside. Yeah, and even exercise that really suffered. It just became clear to me that I should probably quit. So I did. I've done a few of those expected milestones of marriage and divorce, and even before I got to the point of quitting, I started stepping away from those things that were expected of me. I knew that I wanted to travel full time. I took the crazy leap last May, and it's been great in that I have this ultimate freedom. The masking for me is that feeling of like you're cooperating, you're part of a team, you're generally pleasant, and and I agree with all of those things, but at the same time, I'm just so aware that I think I was raised to fit in and be a certain way, be a certain persona, and didn't leave a lot of room for it didn't leave a lot of room for being confident to speak up and speak my mind, and actually I prefer it this way, or do you think we could try this instead. I dread confrontation still. I like people, I like being social, but I'm also an introvert, so I've learned the hard way that that comes with limits. Yeah, in any full-time career that I've done, the higher up you go, the more peopling you have to do, and it becomes a lot. So for me personally, appearance is part of that mask. So I'm still wrestling with the idea that I should be wearing makeup every day to cover my flaws and be this most presentable version of myself. 5 years ago, I stopped coloring my hair. The only one I'm still really, really stuck with is glasses. They're definitely difficult to wear when you're on video because of lights reflecting back. And furthermore, you can feel them on the nose and touching, and so it's becomes this huge like sensory issue and distraction, especially if you're, trying to communicate. So yeah, being unmasked for me is comfort and joy. In fact, that feeling of like things are funnier, I can laugh more. And I'm mostly unmasked when I'm by myself. That's true. There's the times though when I'm with certain friends and people that I meet even straight away. I think we have this way of like zoning in on each other, but I can unmask around others as soon as I feel like it's safe to do so. Yeah, I think my reactions are more genuine when I'm unmasked, because when I'm masking, I have to think about whether I'm making the right reaction. And, often that processing time, there's a delay. Always going to be a delay. Oh, another interesting one is that I became aware of toe walking was very common for people who are autistic. And after I got my diagnosis, it feels like it kind of came back to me like almost naturally, especially in the morning. Or maybe I was doing it and just not aware of it. I'm not really sure, but yeah, that was interesting. And I have vague memories of being told off for walking on my toes when I was a kid. So, out of financial necessity, I had to live with other people at various points in my life, either housemates or like romantic partners. That was a disaster because I'm naturally kind of messy. So my brain doesn't automatically put things away. If I come home, things get set down on their surface and they might get like spread out a little bit more, but they don't generally go away into a home. This had so many problems when I was younger and trying to share space. I think I wish I had the awareness and the knowledge to basically seek out more compatible living companions, if that makes sense. And that might have avoided a lot of the confrontation. Now, I know I love living alone, and that's why house sitting works for me. Cats make wonderful housemates, usually. This is in response to what I wish they knew. So there's three main things. The first one is that there are physical manifestations that aren't necessarily visible. For me, digestive issues, and then the other one is dyspraxia. I suck at dancing. I suck at any kind of team sport. I'm just not coordinated, and that means I'm bumping into things and tripping over things. And I also recently saw at dinner with some friends that after the plates were all cleared away, I was clearly the messiest eater. It's kind of embarrassing. The next one is that the environment impacts me so much. So, a good example is if I'm out to dinner with people, then I'm constantly trying to filter out all the background noise and pay attention to who's speaking and make sure I appear normal. And then also formulate an appropriate response. And then another really good example is I've also had problems when I was out hiking with groups because I'll be paying attention to where I'm going. If there's people in front of me, make sure I keep my pace. And then there's also all of the other surrounds around me, and I'm, assessing, those. And then if someone speaks to me without actually saying my name first, my brain doesn't register that they're speaking to me, and I will miss the first few words. And I've been accused of not paying attention or not listening, and that sucks. It hurts. I don't know how much of this is the ADHD, but it's definitely been an issue. The last one is that alone time is absolutely critical. Throughout my life, at various times, I've had to live with other people, and the amount of showing up we have to do and the amount of work it takes is hard to put into words, because in a lot of cases there's an expectation to be social and to maintain the home to a certain standard. And I guess now I have the language to advocate for my needs around alone time, but back then I didn't, and it was hard. I'm naturally messy, and I think all of the masking led to a few episodes of burnout. And related to my other passion in life, which is travel, I definitely travel alone. I don't mind it, but sometimes it's nice to have some shared experiences with people, or be traveling with someone else. But for me, that means, we spend a couple hours together. Maybe we do something in the day and we have some dinner, but I definitely don't want to share a room, and I don't want to be joined at the hip 24/7. And that goes for partners as well. Putting those needs into words is a little bit tricky, but I think it's gone okay. Otherwise, I do a lot of house sitting, and I'm definitely alone apart from a couple cats, and they don't count. They're fine. Younger me, I would tell her, none of these labels that you've been slapped on with have any relevance anymore. So things like lazy, forgetful. I had an ex-boyfriend call me basket case. The other thing I always was aware of is that I can barely take care of myself. Like, how could I take care of a baby? And I'd have conversations with other women, and they would just say things like, "Oh, you'll figure it out. You'll find a way." And I thought about that, and I thought, well, that might be true, but I sometimes feel like I'm barely hanging on. And I also think about my own childhood where things weren't always very happy. So in the end, the undiagnosed autism and ADHD, it cost me a lot of my relationships. It also probably cost me the chance to have a family in the community of people who are, not mothers, not by choice, that we call it childless by circumstance. And it definitely stings, but at the same time, I don't hate the way my life's turned out. I'm certainly not devastated. I did go through a mourning period. I don't even know what to tell my younger self about that, other than you'll always have choices in life. I would love to tell myself when I was younger that I had many flavors of neurodivergent, and that, I would need to operate a little bit differently than what others are telling me. That would have saved a lot of awfulness, I suppose. Also, I would remind myself not to ignore my gut instincts, because if something doesn't feel right, then it's not for you. And I also would tell myself not to compare myself to others, especially neurotypicals. It's just not a comparable situation. If they're running at 100% battery and I'm running at 75%, then there's no way. So I've learned to give myself a lot more grace. I know things take me a lot longer, especially when I'm in learning mode, but then I can be really good at things and really fast and really efficient. So we're all going to have different abilities and different interests. So I'm going to try to lean in on the things I care most about.